Next phase, Thorn declared, his voice taut. His fingers danced over the control panel. Across the fleet, a silent ballet began. The human ships, initially scattered like fleeing minnows, realigned in an uncanny imitation of a predator's grin. The Krell advance slowed. Their flagship, a monstrous leviathan bristling with weaponry, hesitated. Thousands of years had forged arrogance into their very code. They'd feasted on terror. To face a prey species that turned to face them was unsettling. Riker's lips curled into a grim smile. Looks like we've got their attention. Not for long. Thorn flicked a switch. Disruptor fields engage. The human ships vanished, not cloaking but a tactical sleight of hand, bending light, distorting sensors, a gamble born of desperation. The Krell flagship fired blindly into the void, its blast rippling through empty space. Sir, we're picking up... A bridge officer choked on the words. Across their sensor displays, dozens of tiny blips flickered into being. Mines. Not laid in advance, but spat from the human ships and now bobbing like grotesque fruit around the Krell fleet. Thorn, you mad bastard, Riker breathed. This wasn't a war, it was the tactic of a cornered rat. Incoming! Thorn's head jerked up, eyes fixed on a single massive blip amidst the minefield. The Krell, no longer blind, were adapting. A wave of radiation washed over the human fleet, scrambling shields, making ghosts of their ships once more. And then, the Krell attack carrier surged forward, spitting out swarms of smaller fighters. This was the endgame. Sweep the minefield, crush the humans in close combat where their tricks wouldn't matter. They're learning fast, Riker muttered. Thorn grinned, feral and bright. But are they learning fast enough? His hands were a blur again. Weapons hot. Target those carriers. I want them gone yesterday. The first human volley was not a clean strike, but a desperate barrage aimed more at a disruption than destruction. The Krell carriers reacted, their sleek forms weaving through the fire. But they were too many, too close. Shrapnel speared into their hulls, detonating internal systems. Two carriers, behemoths that had swatted aside entire planetary defenses, erupted in blinding flashes. The Krell hesitated. For a species honed on the purity of conquests, this was chaos. Thorn seized the moment, punching orders into the comm system. Disregard the flagship. All ships, focus fire on the fighters. Deny them the skies. Human vessels designed for speed and maneuverability became maddened hornets. Laser beams lashed out, tracking the darting shapes of the Krell fighters. The nimble enemy craft were fearsome on the attack, but in a dogfight, their light armor offered little defense. The void lit up as dozens of fighters blossomed into fireballs. But the Krell flagship was the true monster. Its primary weapon systems came online, spewing beams of annihilation that vaporized one human frigate and crippled another. Riker swore, his knuckles white on the armrest. Thorn, we can't bleed like this! We bide time. Thorn snapped back. His eyes were wild, darting between readouts. We force them to engage on our terms, to fight the battle we've chosen. His words proved prophetic. The Krell flagship, enraged by the defiance, committed. It plowed through its own fighter screen, a lumbering titan determined to crush all opposition directly. This brought it within range. Now! Thorn roared. Hidden within the chaos of the battle, several human ships had disengaged. Their disruptor fields pulsed, not vanished, but wrong. To the Krell's sensors, the ships were monstrous distortions, bleeding into reality impossible shapes. Now they converged on the flagship, their weapons blazing at point-blank range. The Krell's shields flared, overloaded, hull plates buckled, then shattered. The flagship spasmed, listing to one side. Riker let out a triumphant whoop, but the fight was far from over. The wounded flagship became the galaxy's most dangerous wound. Krell vessels swarmed to their leader's defense, their initial arrogance replaced by a cold fury. The human ships were no longer prey, but a seething wasp nest to be exterminated. They're pulling back, Riker noted, regrouping around their flagship. Expected. Thorn's eyes narrowed as he assessed the new tactical display. The Krell had abandoned their predatory advance for a hardened defensive sphere. The flagship, though heavily damaged, remained a potent threat. Can we finish it? Riker asked. His voice held a sliver of hope, quickly dashed by Thorn's reply. Not without unacceptable losses. We've rattled them, Admiral. But this was never about winning a single battle. Then what the hell was it about? Riker barked. Thorn leaned forward, intensity radiating from his eyes. It was about showing them blood. Human blood. He gestured at the display. We wounded their pride. crippled their symbol of power. Now every Krell ship across the galaxy has one question burning in their minds. If these primates could do this, then what else can they do? He met Riker's gaze. That fear, Admiral. That's our edge. Riker studied Thorne, seeing not just a brilliant tactician, but a man teetering between genius and madness. Yet he couldn't deny the chilling logic of it. So we bleed them, Riker concluded. 1,000 cuts, not one massive blow? Precisely. Thorne turned back to his console. We disengage, leave them with their wounded leader. Taste of what's to come. The human ships executed a coordinated withdrawal, leaving a trail of debris in the smoldering hulk of the Krell flagship. It was a bruised victory, not a triumphant one. But they had survived. They had struck back, and across the vastness of space, the echo of human defiance reverberated. News of the first human counterattack against the Krell ignited a wildfire across the galaxy. Races that had cowered for centuries watched in stunned disbelief. The whispered name, human, now carried both fear and a desperate flickering hope. Riker and Thorne found themselves facing a whole new kind of battlefield. Diplomatic channels buzzed with messages. Some were veiled pleas for aid, others thinly disguised warnings. Certain races, long accustomed to neutrality, now hedged their bets, fearing repercussions should the tide turn in humanity's favor. Yet the Krell remained the immediate threat. Their attacks became more focused, less a blitzkrieg and more a scalpel aimed at excising the infection called humanity. But with each Krell ship destroyed, with each world defended, more races found the courage to resist, spurred by the knowledge they weren't alone. Thorne thrived in this new war. Each Krell move was a puzzle to decipher. With Riker covering his back politically, Thorne's unorthodox tactics turned into brutal checkmates. Minefields hidden within asteroids, feigned retreats drawing the Krell into crippling ambushes, even hijacking Krell communication signals to sow discord within their fleets. But not all victories were so clean. Thorne's brilliance came at the cost of ruthlessness. He viewed entire planets as disposable pawns if it gave them a strategic edge. Riker, hardened as he was, grew troubled seeing the echoes of Krell callousness mirrored in the eyes of his own lieutenant commander. "This is how we win, Admiral," Thorne had argued after sacrificing a civilian colony to halt a Krell advance. "They play the game with no rules, so neither can we." Riker's answer was a grim silence. Victory was hollow if they became the very monsters they fought. The Krell, masters of adaptation, recognized the shifting tides. The humans weren't merely a nuisance, but a true existential threat. Their response was chillingly logical. Target the source. Human worlds were far removed from the front lines, tucked away in supposedly safe sectors. These became the Krell's new hunting grounds. Not the vast fleets that had subjugated empires, but smaller, stealthier squadrons designed for maximum devastation against soft targets. News reached Riker and Thorne in a flood of panic communiques, colonies ablaze, frantic evacuation calls, and all happening far beyond where their fleets could respond in time. It was a brutal realization. They couldn't be everywhere at once. Thorne seethed with frustration. "They've outmaneuvered us," he growled, the cool tactician momentarily replaced by a man cornered. Riker studied the star maps, the pain of his people etched across his face. "We're spread too thin." "We need to change the rules again," Thorne snapped, regaining his composure. "They're playing hit and run because they can. We need to make them think twice before striking civilian targets." "How?" Riker challenged, more out of desperation than doubt. Thorne's smile was a predator's baring of teeth. "We can give them something they can't ignore, something they can't resist attacking." 2 weeks later, a hastily assembled human fleet hung in space just beyond the border of Krell territory. It was a ragtag force, scrapped together warships, barely armed freighters, even civilian vessels modified for combat. At its center was a single asteroid, unremarkable, save for the network of transmitters bolted to the surface. The broadcast went out, echoing into the void, a simple message repeated in a dozen languages and, of course, in the harsh tongue of the Krell. Coordinates, an open challenge, and the promise of glorious battle. The Krell answered with the speed of a predator sensing a wounded animal. It wasn't the full might of their armadas, but a force of significant size, enough to obliterate the makeshift human fleet and perhaps to send a chilling message that resistance was futile. Inside the human command ship, tension crackled thicker than the recycled air. Riker and Thorn hunched over the displays, tracing the relentless approach of the Krell vessels. "This is it," Riker murmured. "Everything hinges on this gamble." Thorn's eyes remained fixed on the screen. "Gamble? Admiral, this isn't luck. It's psychology. The Krell can't resist the chance to stamp us out. Their pride demands it. And if you're wrong, then we go down fighting," Thorn countered, unwavering. "Either way, we bleed them. We make them pay for every world they burn, for every life they took." The first exchange of fire was almost anticlimactic. The Krell ships blasted their way through the initial line of human defense with contemptuous ease. Thorn barely flinched. He was playing a long game. Each sacrificed ship apiece moved across the cosmic chessboard. Closer they came. The Krell focused on the asteroid, the promised prize. Then, like a hand snapping a whip, it happened. The asteroid wasn't a mere rock. It was a honeycomb, packed with scavenged reactors and jury-rigged shielding systems. With a blinding flash, the makeshift star overloaded. The blast wasn't meant to destroy the Krell ships, but to scramble their systems, blindsiding them at the worst possible moment. It was then Thorn unleashed his true ambush. Hidden in the shadows of nearby moons, a squadron of human fighters, their engines modified for silence, streaked out, targeting the disoriented Krell. The battle near the rigged asteroid was a dance of fire and death. Human fighters, fueled by desperation and Thorn's tactical genius, swarmed around the larger Krell vessels like vengeful insects, inflicting targeted strikes. The Krell, masters of conquest, found themselves rattled, their usual brutal efficiency faltering. But numbers still favored the enemy. Krell ships, though disoriented, fought back. Human fighters dissolved in bursts of flame. Riker clenched his fists, every casualty a fresh wound to his soul. Then, a transmission cut through the chaos. "Admiral, we have it. The flagship shields are down." It was Thorn, his voice laced with a desperate triumph. A single human capital ship, the Valiant, had endured the onslaught long enough to maneuver within striking distance of the Krell flagship. "Finish it, Thorn! End this!" Riker commanded, his voice heavy. There was a pause, just a heartbeat too long. "Admiral, there's a complication." "What kind of complication?" Riker demanded, dread seeping into his gut. "Civilian signals, hundreds of them. Life pods from the colonies the Krell hit, they're drifting directly into the Valiant's line of fire." The trap had sprung out on both sides. The Krell, in their arrogance, had not bothered to finish the colonies they've raided. Now, amidst the battle, those desperate survivors were a human shield. Riker closed his eyes, seeing not star charts, but faces. Women, children. The cost of this war made brutally real. "Thorn," he barked. "Get the Valiant out of there. Abort the strike." Silence. Then, "Sir, we have just one shot. Just one. If we lose it, we don't become them." Riker cut in, his voice like granite. "Pull back the ship, Thorn. That's an order." Thorn obeyed, but the taste of ashes lingered in his mouth. The Valiant retreated, the Krell flagship escaping their grasp. The humans managed to salvage a tactical victory. The Krell had again suffered heavy losses, but their leadership remained alive, a venomous serpent wounded but not slain. And then came the even bleaker victory. Rescue operations. Hundreds of human civilians were pulled from the wreckage, survivors of the Krell raids. Yet their faces held not relief but a chilling emptiness, their eyes mirroring the haunted desperation Riker saw in his own reflection. The victory broadcast intended to boost morale backfired spectacularly. Images of the emaciated refugees were beamed across the galaxy. While some races rallied even closer to humanity's banner, others recoiled. They saw not a righteous savior, but a brutalized species now mirroring the ruthlessness of their oppressors. In private, Thorn confronted Riker. "It was the right call, Admiral, technically," he conceded, but his voice lacked conviction. "We stalled them. We bought time. 1,000 more humans are alive because of you." Riker stared out at the distant stars, feeling the weight of 1,000 dead on his shoulders. "And how many more will die before this is over, Thorn? How long until that line fades between us and the Krell?" His voice was barely a whisper. There was no answer. Thorn had spent his genius devising ways to kill, and now he was faced with the chilling consequences of victory. The Krell, too, adapted. Their attacks became less direct, favoring hit-and-run tactics and targeting their newly allied races, sowing doubt and fear. The war had taken an ugly, insidious turn, one where winning battles didn't guarantee winning hearts and minds. A pall hung over humanity, not of defeat, but of a profound uncertainty. Every victory against the Krell left them a touch colder. Every strategic compromise chipped away at who they were. Riker and Thorne found themselves locked in countless tense debates, mirroring the crisis splitting the galaxy. "We need more allies," Riker would argue, his voice strained with exhaustion. "We need to show them we're not a plague to be avoided, but a beacon to be followed." Thorne would scoff at the idealism. "And how would we do that, Admiral? With parades and speeches? While the Krell slit our throats, we'll offer them flowers." His eyes were haunted, burning with a single-minded intensity. "They fear only one thing, our capacity to destroy." It was Jar, the ship's AI, its voice devoid of emotion that offered a chillingly pragmatic solution. Analyzing data from thousands of sources, it concluded that to secure decisive victories, humanity needed a technological leap, something to shift the paradigm once more. Jar's cold logic led them to a derelict space station orbiting a dead world, a remnant of a forgotten civilization. Its archives held blueprints, not for new weapons, but for something potentially far more powerful. A prototype for faster-than-light travel. If they could master it, they could hit the Krell where they were weakest. Their empire was built on superior speed, allowing them to strike quickly and fade away. True FTL-equipped ships would turn the tables. They could bypass Krell defenses entirely, strike at the heart of their territories, force them into a defensive war they were ill-equipped to fight. But it was a gamble greater than any they'd taken before. The technology was unstable, untested. A single miscalculation could tear a ship and its unsuspecting crew apart at the subatomic level. The decision weighed on Riker like a tombstone. In the end, they chose, not out of hope this time, but out of relentless necessity. The first test was a disaster. The ship shuddered, warped, and vanished in a flash too brief to be visible. No distress signal, nothing. Just gone. The void seemed to swallow it whole. Riker's grief was a silent, crushing weight. It was he who had authorized the test flight, volunteers drawn from the best humanity had to offer. Was it hubris, desperation, or a thirst for revenge that had driven him to sacrifice them in the pursuit of an impossible dream? Thorne was a different kind of broken. He isolated himself, poring over data, the ghost of the lost ship haunting him. His tactical brilliance flickered, replaced by a frantic desperation. They weren't just fighting the Krell now, but the unyielding laws of the universe itself. Yet they did not give up. This was the human way now, to carry grief and desperation as fuel, to press on even when hope was a guttering flame. Thorne redesigned the prototype, adjusted tolerances, gambling against the cold calculus of physics. They had to succeed, or their extinction was assured. The second test, and then the third, each trial brought them agonizingly closer. Each sacrifice a terrible testament to the human spirit. The ships would reappear, mangled, crews half-mad with terror. But with the precious data, they might crack the secret of FTL travel and end the war. It was a war fought on two fronts. The usual war against the Krell raged on, a bloody stalemate neither side could break. Yet every sacrifice bought them time, those seconds ticking down to a final, desperate throw of the dice. Thorne and Riker, barely speaking, worked with the intensity of the damned. Theirs was a race not against just the Krell, but against the very nature of reality. Could they master this monstrous technology before the galaxy tore itself apart? Or was this the final act in the tragedy of a species reaching for salvation, only to find its own doom? The final test. Thorne, his once sharp eyes dulled with exhaustion, keyed in the command sequence. The ship, a Frankensteinian amalgamation of salvaged parts and desperate hope, shuddered. Time seemed to stretch thin. Then, in a roar that rattled their bones, it vanished. This time there was no flickering return, only silence. Days turned into weeks, no distress signal, no wreckage, no triumphant return. The crew of the prototype ship was gone. Their sacrifice added to the mountain of human lives lost in this brutal conflict. Riker stared out at the lifeless void, a hollow shell of his former self. Was this it? Was humanity destined to be another cautionary tale? A flicker of brilliance extinguished by its own ambition? Then, A faint tremor echoed through space. It wasn't a blip on the sensor, an anomaly. It was a presence, cold and predatory, emanating from a core sector of Krell territory. A communication channel opened. A distorted voice laced with a chilling fury crackled through the speakers. It wasn't a threat, but a howl of despair. The message translated in a heartbeat was simple. They're everywhere. They can't be stopped. The human fleet, battered and weary, received the same message on countless screens. Krell warships sputtered and died, ripped apart from within by something unseen. It was a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed, a byproduct of the FTL technology, a chaotic tear in the fabric of spacetime used as a weaponized anomaly. The Krell, masters of conquest, met their ends at the hands of their own arrogance. The reliance on swift attacks made them vulnerable to the omnipresent threat of the human FTL ships, lurking like ghosts just beyond the boundaries of reality. The war ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. No grand showdown, just a chilling silence where a galactic empire once stood. Humanity had won, but the victory tasted like ash. The future was uncertain. The technology that saved them was a double-edged sword, and the ethical lines they crossed during the war were forever blurred. Yet, amidst the wreckage of 1,000 worlds, they survived. Battered, broken, but alive. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what kind of future a species tempered by near extinction would forge from the ashes of the Krell scourge.